Episode 15. The Unstateliness of the World. I know it's been a minute since I've recorded. I've been quite busy with work and life. But as we all know, as we all have seen and read and heard, the news doesn't stop when our own lives get busy. And there have been quite a few headlines recently that, for many of my friends and my family, have been disturbing. I won't go into the specifics there. Suffice it to say, here in the United States, there have been some court rulings that seem to threaten the very idea, the very underpinning of democracy. But there are multiple sides to that. I just know that for me personally, and for those in my intimate circles, these decisions, these rulings, along with the politics that swirl constantly around us, it's very easy to be depressed, to be weighed down. And increasingly, I have coworkers and friends who mention in regular day-to-day conversations that they have a hard time focusing, motivating themselves to do basic things in daily life because the situation on a grander scale in the world seems quite dire. Say what you will about that, but that hit home for me, and it got me thinking about what is actually happening and who is steering the ship, and what does it mean for us? And as is my wont, I took to writing some poems to express my thoughts in the moment on this. So I wanted to share two of them that align with some of the narratives that I have heard and some of what I'm starting to feel. So I'll read a couple of these and then just share a little bit about what was going through my mind as I wrote them. The first one is called White Man's Story. Man fights with other men, most of them also white. Or that's what it should say, the newspapers. The black and whiteys, the ironically two-dimensioned air beats. Wasn't it Murrow who said, "Journalism is the art of the nuanced and the science of people-pleasing"? No, that's not right. No one ever said that. No sorry, seduced journalist boxed in by the corporate Ozymandias would pen a feature on the many shades of graying octogenarians. Do you remember when we worshipped cherubic gods and shivered in our straw-thatched huts for fear of divine reprisal? Just for a word this side of kind, a sliver of bread taken to survive. When white men, however Napoleonic, craned their necks like the rest of us to gawk at something bigger, better, best. Those were the days. I think one of the things that stands out to me in all of the narratives and stories and opinions that are floating around about the state of politics and the world generally, but specifically our governments, is that increasingly there seems to be a divide between those who represent us and what we as the public want. Many feel unrepresented. Many feel like their voices are not heard. And even in the best democracies, it is difficult to represent everyone. Majority rule, minority rights. We hear that a lot here in the United States. But as we see the results of elections across the world, there are a lot of far-right or right-leaning parties that are taking control of governments, legislatures, executive branches. And in my mind, anyway, a lot of these are supported by folks who are white. Not entirely, but they're there is a lot of white representation in these parties, in these groups, contrasting with other groups that are more diverse. Again, I don't want to make blanket statements, but an observation on some of the trends that I'm seeing. And so that brings to mind the question of how true, how reflective of the populace are the opinions of these groups. And what does it mean for these countries, our own included, the United States, when groups like this take the reins of power? And white men in particular have had a story here in the United States, and it's not always been a good story. In fact, there have been very dark chapters, and we may be starting yet another. I hope not, but conversations like this are happening, among my friends and family and intimates, as I said, but in larger groups as well. Are the people of these countries, are they being represented fairly? Are they being represented at all? Or is there a minority that's taking the helm, a minority voice? And what does that mean for our future? But I'll switch gears a little bit now. It's actually sort of in the same vein, but I think part of what I struggle with is this feeling of helplessness when it comes to politics and the ebb and flow of political opinion and representation in government, even here in the United States, where democracy is what we prize, what we champion, and what we try to maintain and keep unsullied. And I think the helplessness is perhaps one of the most difficult parts of reading the news right now, when it's hard to read the news and feel like there's little that you can do to change it. I know that there are very strong opinions about civic engagement and involvement, and absolutely there is an argument to be made for those efforts and that sort of engagement. But I wanted to honor for a moment that feeling of helplessness, because I know for a fact it's not unique to me. And I think it's actually a feeling that is increasing, a sentiment that is increasing. So this next poem I called The Current. I work from home these days, content to waddle from a 4-shot Americano to my desk before 7, half drowned in the slurry of business, barely making it ahead, my head just below the waves of musts and measures. But perhaps content is too strong a word, too magnanimous. I'm better put yielded to the currents that throw me here every morning, and I drug happily with caffeine to make it through, and I find the unnecessary treats that buoy me. But now they say I cannot any more choose to let the current rip me along. I cannot, on every so often days, push my eyes above the rabid foam to see the wreck I'm headed toward, and in a flash of lucidity, despise it. No, the water will still rush, with energy whose provenance I do not understand, but now they say I will like it. In the swell and in the rage, in the knocks against the boulders and the detritus of others like me, I must like it. Because this much is true whichever way we flow, and it's hard for me to deny. You cannot argue with the current. Part of the helplessness that I think we're all feeling, well, I'll speak for myself and those I talk to, is not that there isn't anything we can do. We can do things. We can talk to our representatives. We can voice our opinions. These things are possible and prized in a democracy. But the problem, I think, is more the sheer number of things that weigh us down, all the things that feed that current right now in our lives, they make our day-to-day existence exhausting, make it feel like we're constantly pushing back, pushing against, trying to stay afloat, even without the larger picture in play, even without the struggles in politics and the troubles in government. So where do we find the energy to lift ourselves out of the current, to push back, to do anything to change it? Is it possible? What needs to change for us to do that? I don't have a good answer. I'm still figuring it out, still talking to friends and family, those I know and trust, whose opinions I respect, to figure out what makes the most sense for us right now. And escape, running away, seems like an easy solution. I know that that's joked about sometimes, but how do we push forward? How do we own and contribute to the future of our own communities and societies and countries in a productive, helpful way? I think a lot of us are in that space, struggling to find answers. But I'm pretty sure of this, at least, that we likely won't come to any solution, and we certainly won't be able to enact change by ourselves. We have to do this together. So the conversations will continue, and I just hope that we can find a bit more energy in the course of our daily lives, a bit more focus, time to reflect and to think about how we act on these things, because they're critical to ourselves, our future, and whatever comes after us. It could be that this is the precipice of something devastating. Not to be dramatic, but it's possible, and it certainly feels like that sometimes. So it's time to prioritize those conversations, that collaboration, and to try, to the best of our abilities, to carve out energy, space, and time to make sure our voice is included and that we're acting according to our conscience in the best interest of our communities, our countries, ourselves.